When I opened the door that Tuesday morning, expecting to find Mary with her usual morning smile and the coffee she always made, I found a note stuck to the worn wood. "No complaints, your furniture's been sold, bye." The words danced before my eyes like venomous snakes, each letter a stab to the heart. My legs trembled, and for a moment I thought I'd collapse right there in the cold hallway. The curt "bye" echoed in my mind like a devilish taunt as I pushed open the door and stepped into what remained of my home. The apartment was empty, completely empty. Where my majestic burgundy velvet armchair, a gift from my beloved Anthony on our 10th anniversary, once stood, there was only the square imprint of dirt on the hardwood floor, like a scar on the ground. Grandma Helen's mahogany desk, where I wrote letters to my granddaughters every Sunday, had vanished, leaving only nail holes in the wall where the drawers had been. My eyes scanned every corner of this space that, just hours before, had breathed history and affection, and now felt like a cold, soulless cave. Each piece of information was a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Mary had been careful, but not perfect. She'd left traces, and Paul was collecting them with the meticulousness of a detective. He wrote everything down in a small notebook in his tiny but legible handwriting. "Mrs. Cecilia," he said late in the afternoon, "we have enough material to get started. Tomorrow we're going to the police station, and you'll see that you're not alone in this fight." That night, I slept on the floor of the living room, wrapped in an old blanket I found in the bathroom cabinet, the only piece of furniture Mary had left behind, probably because it was built in and difficult to remove. But it wasn't a sleep of defeat. It was the sleep of someone who had found a cause, a purpose. For the first time in months, I felt that my life had a meaning that went beyond mere survival. I was going to fight. The next morning, Paul accompanied me to the police station. The place was exactly as I imagined, cold, smelling of old paper and reheated coffee, full of people with troubled eyes. When it was our turn, the officer who attended us was a young man in his 30s who looked at us with an expression that mixed boredom and condescension. "So, your caregiver stole from you?" he asked, without looking up from the paperwork he was filling out. "Caregiver," I corrected, "and yes, she sold all my furniture while I was away." The officer continued writing, asking bureaucratic questions about dates, estimated values, and documents. When I mentioned that I didn't have receipts for all the furniture because some of it was very old, he sighed impatiently. "Ma'am, you have to understand that without proof of ownership, it's difficult to prove theft," he said, finally looking at me. "And another thing, you gave her the keys, so technically it wasn't a break-in." My anger grew like a bonfire fueled by a strong wind. They had a method. First, they approached the victim, gained their trust, mapped their financial situation and assets. Then, they created a situation that allowed unrestricted access to the house, a trip, a hospitalization, a visit to relatives. Finally, they executed the scam quickly and efficiently, disappearing with everything they could carry. Mrs. Eunice had been a victim of the same scheme. Her caregiver had been named Robert, and he had used exactly the same techniques, gained her trust, mapped her assets, created a situation for her to leave home, and sold everything while she was away. Other women in the group had similar stories, with minor variations in the method, but always the same result: elderly people stripped not only of their possessions, but of their dignity. That's when we decided that it wasn't enough to just support each other. We needed to act. We began documenting all the cases, gathering evidence, and mapping the criminal network. Paul helped us understand what kind of information would be useful to the police, how to organize our testimonies, and how to make our case stronger. But it wasn't easy. In the first few months, we faced disbelief from all sides. Some neighbors saw us as trouble-making old ladies who had nothing better to do. Some family members thought we were wasting our time on something that wouldn't yield results. Even some legal professionals treated us condescendingly, as if we were incapable of understanding the complexities of the legal system. It was in one of these frustrating situations that we received an unexpected visit. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and we were gathered in my living room. I had managed to buy 2 plastic chairs and a small table with my retirement money when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found a well-dressed young woman who introduced herself as a lawyer. "My name is Dr. Regina Santos," she said, "and I'd very much like to talk to you about your cases." Dr. Regina had learned about our group through a local newspaper article about the increase in crimes against the elderly. She specialized in consumer law and elder rights, and she offered to represent us pro bono, that is, without charging fees. "You have a just cause," she said, "and I believe we can achieve not only compensation, but also changes in the system that will protect other elderly people." With Dr. Regina's help, our case took on a new dimension. She explained that we were entitled not only to compensation for material damages, but also for moral damages. More importantly, she showed us that our case could serve to change public policies, to create more effective protection mechanisms for the elderly. That's when something happened that completely changed the course of our struggle. During one of the police investigations, they discovered that Mary had used false documents to apply for the caregiver position. Her real name was Marcia, and she had an extensive criminal record, including other scams against the elderly. Even more, she was part of a gang that operated in several neighborhoods of the city, always using the same method. The discovery was shocking, but also liberating. I hadn't been the victim of a crime of passion committed by someone I knew and trusted. I had been the victim of professional criminals who used sophisticated techniques to exploit vulnerable people. This, somehow, lessened the personal humiliation I felt. But the most important thing happened when the police managed to track down some of my furniture. It had been sold to an antique thrift store in the city center, and the owner of the establishment had kept the receipts. Among the recovered pieces was my desk, Grandma Helen's desk, where I had written so many letters, where I had made so many plans, where I had cried so many tears. When I saw the desk again, almost 2 years after the crime, I cried like I hadn't cried in decades. It wasn't just a piece of furniture being returned. It was a piece of my history, of my identity coming back home. Paul, who had accompanied me to identify the piece, held my hand and said, "See, Mrs. Cecilia, didn't I tell you we weren't going to give up?" The trial took place on a cold July morning. The courthouse was full. Our case had gained media attention, and many people came to support us. Mary, or Marcia, was there, visibly nervous, accompanied by a public defender. She had changed her hair, lost weight, and looked very different from the caring woman I had known. During the trial, I had to tell my story again, this time to the judge. I talked about the trust I had placed in her, how she had taken advantage of my loneliness, and the humiliation I felt when I found the apartment empty. But I also talked about what I had learned during those 2 years of struggle, that I wasn't alone, that I had rights, that my voice mattered. Mary, or Marcia, was sentenced to 3 years in prison in order to pay compensation for material and moral damages. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for all the elderly people who had been treated as second-class citizens, as people without rights, as easy victims. But the real transformation had happened within me. I was no longer the same woman who had sat on the floor of the empty apartment, weeping over the loss of my furniture. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed, a fighting spirit that had lain dormant for decades. More importantly, I had discovered that my experience could help other people. If you've been following stories like this, consider subscribing to our channel to continue receiving stories of overcoming adversity and empowerment. Together, we can create a support network that makes a difference in the lives of many people. With part of the settlement, I bought some new furniture for the apartment. It wasn't the same. It could never be, but it was chosen carefully, with love, with the certainty that I deserved a beautiful and decent home. Grandma Helen's writing desk returned to its place in the living room, and it was there that I began to write my memoirs, recording not only my story, but the stories of all the women I met during that journey. Our support group transformed into a legally constituted NGO, the Association for the Defense of the Rights of the Elderly. We partnered with the city government to create a training program for caregivers, including background checks and psychological support. We also created a hotline for reporting crimes against the elderly and a home visitation program for vulnerable seniors.
But perhaps the most important thing is what happened to me internally. I had spent the 5 years after Anthony's death feeling invisible, irrelevant, as if my life had ended with his. Mary's crime had robbed me of my possessions, but it had also given me back something far more valuable: the certainty that I still had much to offer, much to fight for, much to live for.
Today, at 80, I wake up every morning with purpose. My apartment is no longer silent. It's always full of people who come seeking help, support, guidance. My desk no longer holds only letters from my granddaughters, but also draft bills, activity reports, thank you letters from people who have been helped by our work. The experience taught me that no matter our age, we can always start over. We can always reinvent ourselves. We can always transform our pain into strength, our experience into wisdom, our vulnerability into power. The crime that should have destroyed me ended up strengthening me. The betrayal that should have isolated me ended up connecting me with a community of people who share the same values and the same dreams. When I look back at that terrible morning when I found the note on the door, I feel a strange gratitude. Not gratitude for the crime, of course, but gratitude for the journey it started. Gratitude for the discovery that I was much stronger than I imagined. Gratitude for the wonderful people I met during this process. Gratitude for the opportunity to transform my experience into something that could help other people. The greatest lesson I learned is that we should never underestimate the power of a determined person, regardless of age. We should never accept being treated as invisible, as incapable, as passive victims. We all have a story to tell, an experience to share, a contribution to make to society. Today, when I pass the door where that fateful note was stuck, I no longer feel pain. I feel pride. Pride in having transformed the worst experience of my life into the best opportunity for growth I've ever had. Pride in having proven, to myself and to the world, that a woman of 78 can indeed be a transformative force, a leader, a warrior. Grandma Helen's writing desk remains in the same place in the living room, but now it doesn't just hold memories of the past. It holds plans for the future, dreams to win. On it, I have a framed photo of our group at our first meeting, sitting on the floor of my empty living room. Next to it, a more recent photo of all of us at the courthouse, the day the sentence was read. The difference in our faces is striking. We went from scared victims to empowered, confident, determined women. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I take out the note I kept as a memento. No complaints, your furniture's been sold, bye. Those words that once destroyed me now strengthen me. They remind me of where I came from, what I overcame, what I am capable of. They remind me that complaining, yes, is a right. More than that, it's a duty. It's not just about furniture. It never was just about furniture. It's about dignity, respect, recognition that every person, regardless of age, deserves to be treated as a whole human being, with rights, with a voice, with value. It's about understanding that life experience is a treasure, not a burden. That the wisdom accumulated over decades of life is a precious resource for society, not a weight to be discarded. Every story I hear at our weekly meetings, every tear I wipe away, every hand I hold, every victory we celebrate, all of this reminds me of the importance of never giving up, never accepting injustice, never settling for the role of victim. We are survivors, we are fighters, we are examples that age is not a limitation, but a liberation. Liberation from foolish fears, from superficial worries, from the need for the approval of others. Today, when someone asks me about that terrible day when I found the empty apartment, I reply with a smile. It was the day I discovered who I really was. Because it was there, at the bottom of the well, that I found the strength I didn't know I possessed. It was there, in the most absolute solitude, that I discovered that I had never really been alone. It was there, in the greatest humiliation, that I found my greatest dignity. If there's one message I'd like to leave for anyone facing hardship, regardless of age, it's this:
It's never too late to start over. Never too late to fight. Never too late to discover your own strength. Never too late to transform your pain into power, your experience into wisdom, your vulnerability into courage. Life may strip us of our material possessions, it may take away loved ones, it may present us with challenges that seem impossible to overcome. But there's something that no one can take from us: our ability to choose how we react, our determination not to accept defeat, our inner strength that only reveals itself when we need it. I'm Cecilia, I'm 80 years old, and this is my story of rebirth. A story that began with betrayal and ended with transformation. A story that started with a cruel goodbye and ended with a hello full of possibilities. A story that proves that no matter how many years we've lived, we can always write a new chapter. We can always start again. We can always be more than we were yesterday. And if you, reading this story, are no longer young, know that your best years may be just beginning, that your experience is your greatest treasure, that your voice matters, that you matter, that it's never, never too late to discover who you truly are and what you're capable of. Don't complain. On the contrary, complain, yes. Fight, yes. Resist, because you are worth it, because your story is worth it, because you have every right to be heard, respected, valued, because you are not just a number, a statistic, a person of the senior years. You are a complete human being with dreams, rights, potential, and no one can take that away from you. Never.